And then he drops out after a catastrophic debate performance, and they set Kamala Harris up to fail. That was a 3-month campaign, and she was supposed to introduce herself to the American people. No wonder people were Googling, did Joe Biden drop out? And so...
No. No. You're saying 3 months wasn't long enough?
It was too long. It was long enough.
It was long enough.
If they had a primary...
Sure, it's not that they didn't have time to introduce. They met someone and they didn't like them.
If they had a primary, they wouldn't have picked her. And if they had,
That's
she would have been able...
Another round of self-proclaimed intellectuals strutting onto real time with Bill Maher like they're about to school the world. Spoiler alert, they didn't bring facts, they brought feelings. And Maher? He brought a sledgehammer of reality. But how did these woke warriors go from smug to speechless in record time? And what brutal one-liner left the audience cheering while they sat there blinking like deer in headlights? You know how elections are, the pain, the raw emotions, the constant bickering. Well, it seems the left still isn't over the sting of losing and is throwing everything it can at Trump's presidency. First, they got the media on their side. Then, big tech, corporate institutions, and now comedy sketches. But Bill Maher wasn't having it. One SNL skit took a shot at Trump, and Maher
saw Kamala was on Saturday Night Live, as the losing candidate often is. It worked so well for Hillary. Let's run that back. And it just made me think, I'm sure every single member of the Saturday Night Live cast was a Harris supporter. But what if one of them wasn't? What if one of those cast members was for Trump? Would they have felt comfortable saying so? I really don't think so. They would have had to keep it to themselves. That's not a good place for us to be. I remember when... And that happens even more on the left.
Fired back. Watch. The woke mob is still writhing in pain because their favorite didn't win the presidential election. But you know what's worse? They're sore losers, constantly throwing shade and trashing Trump's presidency at every opportunity. From late-night comedy skits to social media rants, it's like they've made Orange Man bad their full-time job. And when facts don't back their outrage, they turn up the volume, hoping no one notices the lack of substance. It's not just criticism, it's obsession disguised as activism. But here's the real question. If Trump's such a loser, why can't they stop talking about him? It's baffling, isn't it? But another issue that Maher finds even more baffling is the Democrats...
You have to be authentic. You can't, reverse engineer any of this off a blueprint. And I really think this is true about politics. Steve Jobs once said, it's not the customer's job to know what they want. It's our job. And you couldn't have reverse engineered Barack Obama off of George W. Bush. And you couldn't have reverse engineered Donald Trump off of Barack Obama. What happens in the end of an election is everyone sifts through the data and they come up with their perfect, their plan based on, well, this worked and with this group and we got attack here and there. And what politics about is a certain point is like innovation and communication. You got to come up with new stories and new ways of telling
this Ken Martin guy, he said something I've heard Democrats say a lot. We didn't get our message out. Or maybe I'm paraphrasing, but that's it. And I've said this before to Democrats. No, you did. That's the problem.
Yeah.
You did get your message out, and people don't like the message.
Claim that they lost the elections because they couldn't get their message out in time. Looks like this guy took a leaf straight out of Kamala Harris's playbook, string together a bunch of words, add some dramatic pauses, and voila. You've said absolutely nothing. Impressive, really. Of course, it's not the politician's job, definitely not the Democrats, to tell us who to vote for. That would be undemocratic, right? Well, Bill Maher had enough of the word salad and shut Chris down cold. He didn't sugarcoat it either. Maher flat out said the voters heard Harris's message, understood it perfectly, and, surprise, surprise, rejected it. Because, shocker, platitudes don't win elections. But here's the kicker.
I think that I don't think there's anyone who hasn't had a moment across the political spectrum of some form of progressive communication that's either left them bewildered or a little I don't know about that. But I also think at the same time, there is a message of what I would call common sense patriotic pluralism. Yeah. That is a majority message, which is if some father and mother have health care for their kid lined up who's trans, just stay the fuck out of their business. And let them make that decision. That's their decision to make. And you don't have to make that for your family. I'm not going to tell you what to do with your family.
But the argument is whether the child should make the decision.
But the child is never making the decision. The parents are always making the decision. Parents consent to medical care.
Well, here in California, you're allowed to hide it from the parents if the kid is.
Yes.
Thank you, one person who knows that.
But I mean,
somebody knows that is the case.
If their message is so powerful, why do they need to shout it over everyone else? Just when you think you've heard enough for the night, Chris drops a shocker. Once again, Chris is doing what the woke crowd does best, muddying the waters and moving the goalposts like it's an Olympic sport. But here's the inconvenient truth. It's on record that most states in the U.S. do allow minors to make life-altering decisions about transitioning without parental consent. And Maher? He didn't mince words. He laid it out plain and simple. Kids are being encouraged to hide this from their parents while school authorities play counselor, doctor, and judge. Think about that. Parents can't sign off on a school trip without a permission slip, but a life-changing medical decision? Totally fine to keep that a secret. So who's really protecting the kids here?
Surely there's a portfolio of jokes that would still
if-
work on a college campus. Surely.
I would hope not. From what maybe some college campuses, the ones you read about are fucking insane.
You've given up on
And
an
the
entire generation, and
I
you don't know how to make them
I
laugh.
have given up on any place that doesn't even remotely attempt to believe in free speech and thinks that anything that they hear that they don't like, that they don't agree with, is violence. These people are fucking nuts, and you should be calling them out. Somebody like you, who has standing with kids, should be not
I do
joining
when
them.
there's a science
You're doing what
objectivity to it,
you're
yes.
doing what parents do. You're
What's that?
taking the path of least resistance, and therefore hurting the kids and yourself. Parents ruin both their lives. They ruin their fucking spoiled kids' lives, and they ruin their own lives because the kids rule the roost. So that's what you're doing on a national level.
Because it sure doesn't look like it's the parents. Still on the subject of kids, Bill Maher once torched renowned scientist Neil deGrasse Tyson for backing college students who disrupted speeches because they didn't agree with what was being said. Take a listen. Looks like Neil deGrasse Tyson has officially gone woke. Shocking, right? I mean, what else do you expect from a guy who unironically claims there are infinite genders? At this rate, we'll need a calculator just to keep up. And of course, he's all in on the idea that biological men should totally be allowed to compete in women's sports, because fairness is so last century. Well, Maher wasn't buying the nonsense on real time. He called out Tyson's BS without breaking a sweat. No sugarcoating. No polite disagreement. Just pure, unfiltered common sense.
Scientific American, the magazine. I remember when it was around when I was
grew up with it, yeah.
Grew up with it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, their editor had to quit.
Yeah, I heard about it because she expressed some opinions, right.
Sure, but it sure didn't sound scientific. It didn't sound like the person I would want to be running Scientific American.
Okay.
It was a rant on Twitter. Inequity between male and female athletes is a result not of inherent biological differences between the sexes, but of biases in how they are treated in sports. That's nuts. And it sure ain't scientific, and it's in Scientific American. What I'm asking is, Scientific American is saying, basically, that the reason why an WNBA team can't beat the Lakers is because of societal.
Does she still have her job?
No, not because of this. I said the scandal is not her tweet. The scandal,
Because that was like a year ago, was it? Which one was a year ago?
I think a year ago, women still couldn't beat men in basketball or any other sport. And it wasn't because of society.
Because here's the thing. When the party of science starts treating biology like it's subjective, someone's got to pump the brakes. And Maher? He practically slammed the emergency stop. So the real question is, if reality itself is now problematic, where does it end? When gravity gets cancelled for being oppressive. This one's my favorite, when Bill Maher, a comedian, ended up sounding more like a scientist than Neil deGrasse Tyson. Seriously, how woke do you have to be to suggest women can outcompete men in sports? We're talking biology here, not feelings. And right on cue, Tyson started tap dancing around reality when Maher hit him with a simple question. Could the WNBA All-Star team beat the Lakers? Crickets. Absolute crickets. Because even Tyson, with all his astrophysics credentials, couldn't bring himself to admit the obvious. Why? Because facts don't fit the woke narrative. It's almost poetic, watching a self-proclaimed man of science fumble.
No, it's stuff like there's a new law in this. I think we have way too many regulations and laws, as we've talked about. And this one, I think, says if you're a department store with over 500 employees, You have to have a gender-neutral
the toys.
toy department.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Yeah, I get it.
So do you think that's
No, but it's
silly?
interesting.
Do you think that's a silly thing that
What was interesting?
we too much government there?
Look, that's an interesting one because the department stores came to us supporting that, and they were the ones making a case for that. They were making a case. They're already moving in that direction.
Wanted you to make a law about them?
Well, but they supported the legislation. It wasn't legislation that was enacted, that was initiated from my office, but it was legislation that came up with interesting support from the industry itself. But I understand how that's exploited, and good people can disagree.
Over basic, observable reality. And Maher, he didn't let up. He pressed. Tyson squirmed. And the audience watched the so-called expert struggle to navigate his own logic trap. If truth is now offensive, what's next? Denying gravity because it pulls too hard? And if Bill Maher can do this to woke scientists, think what he can do to woke politicians. Here's Maher with Gavin. If Chris and Kamala are the reigning champs of word salad, meet the undisputed king of evasive answers, Gavin Newsom. The man usually talks like he's auditioning for a TED Talk, sharp, polished, and dripping with self-assurance. But not this time. Maher flipped the script and beat Newsom at his own game. The question: does he think the law enforcing stores with 500-plus employees to have a gender-neutral toy section is silly? That's it. A simple yes or no would have done the trick. But Newsom, he tap-danced like his political...
We still don't have enough water in the Colorado River and all this stuff. Yeah. And then whenever I read, 80% of the water goes to agriculture. Almonds. Right. No one ever asked you about almonds? Oh, I'm going to ask you about almonds. We grow a boatload of almonds.
I'm well aware.
You know how much water it takes?
Many gallons.
1,900 gallons to grow a pound of almonds. Come on, man. Take on big almond.
Take on big almond.
I mean, it's not like we don't have the water.
No. You're right about it. It's not that we don't have the water. That said, the last couple of years were tough. I mean, but it's also where the water's falling and we're not capturing it. And we're not capturing those extreme years with these atmospheric rivers. Wets are getting a lot wetter, dry's drier, hot's getting a lot hotter. And so we've got to modernize our conveyance system. We've got to modernize our storage, not just above ground, but below ground.
Career depended on it. Talking in circles, rambling about the bill's origins, and desperately avoiding the obvious. Because here's the thing. When you're selling woke nonsense, you can't afford straight answers. A simple yes would upset the activists, and a no would expose just how ridiculous the whole thing sounds. And Maher, he just sat there, watching Newsom squirm under the weight of his own spin. Because nothing's funnier than a politician drowning in the word soup they cooked themselves. Frankly speaking, Gavin Newsom could win gold in an Olympic talking competition. The man can yap for days without ever landing on a point. And Maher, he wasn't asking for a monologue, just a simple answer. The question was crystal clear. Why is over 80% of California's water used to grow almonds when almonds only make up 2% of the state's economy? But instead of addressing the elephant, or should we say the almond, in the room, Newsom...
And then he drops out after a catastrophic debate performance, and they set Kamala Harris up to fail. That was a 3-month campaign, and she was supposed to introduce herself to the American people. No wonder people were Googling, did Joe Biden drop out? And so...
No. No. You're saying 3 months wasn't long enough? It was too long. It was long enough. It was long enough.
If they had a primary...
It's not that they didn't have time to introduce. They met someone and they didn't like them.
If they had a primary, they wouldn't have picked her. And if they had,
That's
she would have been
different.
able to
Yes.
rough out those edges that then she basically has to start from scratch with a campaign team she didn't hire that didn't like her. Right?
Woke politicians. Here's Maher with Gavin. If Chris and Kamala are the reigning champs of word salad, meet the undisputed king of evasive answers, Gavin Newsom. The man usually talks like he's auditioning for a TED Talk, sharp, polished, and dripping with self-assurance. But not this time. Maher flipped the script and beat Newsom at his own game. The question: does he think the law enforcing stores with 500-plus employees to have a gender-neutral toy section is silly? That's it. A simple yes or no would have done the trick. But Newsom, he tap-danced like his political career depended on it, talking in circles, rambling about the bill's origins, and desperately avoiding the obvious. Because here's the thing. When you're selling woke nonsense, you can't afford straight answers. A simple yes would upset the activists, and a no would expose
Everything the candidates, especially the Democrats, do to get voters annoys them. The constant texting. Did you get the texts like from Tim Walz every 5 minutes, and like always begging for money and knocking on doors? We've got people knocking on doors. People don't want knocking on your door. Who in this day and age wants someone knocking on? Kids don't even like it when you get a phone call. That's like too much of a invasion of their privacy, which they don't care about.
just how ridiculous the whole thing sounds. And Maher, he just sat there, watching Newsom squirm under the weight of his own spin. Because nothing's funnier than a politician drowning in the word soup they cooked themselves. Frankly speaking, Gavin Newsom could win gold in an Olympic talking competition. The man can yap for days without ever landing on a point. And Maher, he wasn't asking for a monologue, just a simple answer. The question was crystal clear. Why is over 80% of California's water used to grow almonds when almonds only make up 2% of the state's economy? But instead of addressing the elephant, or should we say the almond, in the room, Newsom launched into a TED Talk about storage facilities, climate change, and, of course, global warming. It was classic political theater, throwing up buzzwords into the air and hoping nobody notices you didn't actually answer the question. And Maher, he sat there, half amused, half exasperated, watching Newsom twist himself into knots. Because when the facts don't align with the narrative, all that's left is smoke, mirrors, and a whole lot of empty rhetoric. Funny, isn't it? For all his talk about sustainability, Newsom couldn't sustain a coherent answer.